Victor Gao, a chair professor at Soochow University. Many thanks for joining us. It's good to see you. So South Korea says the sole purpose of the so-called Freedom Edge drills is to boost the allies' defence capabilities. What do you make of that?
Thank you very much. I think the rising tension on the Korean Peninsula and in East Asia as a whole is because of the continued military exercises of many kinds involving the United States, Japan, and ROK, including, for example, the sailing of the nuclear submarine from the United States to the vicinity of the Korean Peninsula, as well as the stationing of the strategic bombing in the Korean Peninsula. Now, this is very dangerous because this can only add to the tension. And strictly speaking, allow me to mention, this joint military exercise, as far as Japan's participation, should be declared illegal. Why? Because according to the pacifist constitution of Japan, the defense forces of Japan are only for domestic purposes, and they are not supposed to be used outside of the boundary of Japan. And apparently, this joint military exercises is not happening on the soil of Japan. It's way outside of Japan. And I think relevant countries really need to condemn such exercise because it is, in my best judgment, in violation of the constitutional requirements in Japan. And the sooner Japan stops such violation of its own constitution, the better, because otherwise it will add to more tension in this part of the world. And it will be an unthinkable scenario if Japan will be involved in any military action again outside of its own territory in violation of its own constitution.
And indeed, while this is all going on in the East China Sea, the US Pacific Fleet in Hawaii is currently hosting RIMPAC, which is considered the world's largest international maritime exercise. What kind of impact do you think this operation could have on the already tense region?
I think this is a strong indication that the United States is not doing its homework to promote peace, but just the contrary. They are really agitating for more war preparedness or Cold War or even hot war. Now, this is the last thing that is needed in the world of today. I hope the United States can really exercise its global leadership by advocating peace rather than standing for war, because war will be mutually destructive. And in the world of today, armed with nuclear weapons by quite a few countries, war between and among major powers will lead to Armageddon. And I hope Washington will really appreciate this point rather than act in wanton disregard of the huge stakes involved in any war between and among major countries in the world of today.
The timing is also very interesting, isn't it? Because it comes, this increase that we're seeing in US military activity does come just shortly after Vladimir Putin paid his visit to North Korea. What do you think Washington's reaction is to the Moscow-Pyongyang alliance?
Well, first of all, I think the United States is the main source for the continuation of the war in Ukraine because it is providing a huge amount of capital, financial resources, intelligence, and military equipment, bombs, more and more sophisticated weapons of all kinds to Ukraine so that the war cannot be stopped. The war is continuing, and the continuation of the Ukrainian war is really adding more to the anxieties and the fragility of the peace on the Eurasian continent as a whole. Now, for Russia and the DPRK, they are neighboring countries. They have full rights to conduct their bilateral relations in their own way, according to their own decision, if it is not in violation of the United Nations Security Council's resolutions. Therefore, I think whatever the United States is thinking about the bilateral relations or the improvement of the bilateral relations between Russia and DPRK, the United States does not have a legitimate reason to interfere or intervene in the bilateral relations between DPRK and Russia. And I just hope the war in Ukraine will not spread around to other parts of the world, including, for example, to East Asia or other parts of Europe. And the better way is for Ukraine and Russia to really sit down at the table to negotiate a solution to achieve ceasefire as quickly as possible rather than allow the war in Ukraine to be used by other countries to achieve its own geopolitical gains, rather than to really solve the issues between Russia and Ukraine.
If we just scratch the surface of the issue for a moment, one of the main reasons reportedly for the US pushing for Taiwan's independence is because of its leading semiconductor industry. And now we see South Korea is also boosting its chip production. So how does this connect to Washington's efforts to cooperate with Taiwan and South Korea as opposed to its long-time democracy narrative?
Whatever the United States is doing regarding Taiwan is in serious violation of the One China policy, which the United States committed to in 1979 and subsequently in the joint communiques between China and the United States. It's apparent that Washington most likely wants to use Taiwan as a proxy to stir up more tensions in our part of the world, or even a war between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait, in violation of the One China policy, which the United States has acknowledged or affirmed since 1979. Now, from the Chinese perspective, this scheme by Washington will never be achieved because there is only one China, and Taiwan is part of China, and the Chinese nation will defend to the very last minute to achieve reunification one way or another. And no foreign countries, including the United States, will have any wherewithal to stand in the way to prevent the unification of China. Therefore, I think Washington is really very much in a panicking mood because it wants to solve different things in different parts of the world, either through war or agitation for war, or, for example, intervening in the domestic affairs of other countries, because the Taiwan issue is purely a domestic Chinese issue. It has nothing to do with any foreign country, and the United States' attempt to promote Taiwan separatism or even independence doomed to failure eventually.
Thanks for speaking to us. It's good to hear your thoughts on the situation. Victor Gao, Chair Professor at Soochow University. Thank you.